Every day we see more tents under bridges, more families living out of cars. And while the problems seem insurmountable, the solutions are simpler than you think. We share the real stories and the real solutions of homelessness, what works, what doesn't, and how communities like ours can do better. I'm Baron King, and this is Give Me Shelter. This is 24/7 low barrier shelters. What are they and why do they work? So we've all seen it. People sleeping on park benches, tent encampments, people sleeping in business doorways, and probably you've wondered, why is that? And what I would ask you is, if you found yourself homeless, where would you go, right? Perhaps we have friends or family we could stay with, but for those people that don't have those resources, the options are pretty slim, okay? And so we want to talk a little bit about this idea called a 24/7 low barrier shelter. Some communities have them. What's interesting is cities that have gone this direction as an intervention for homelessness have seen the best reductions in homeless numbers. And cities that do not have these types of shelters continue to struggle with it. So we're going to delve into a little bit about what they are, why they work, what their limitations are, because we want to be honest and balanced. But keep in mind, and this is really important, there's only two kinds of property, right? There's private property. So if I'm homeless and I'm going to climb over someone's fence and try and sleep in their backyard, well, that's trespassing. You're not allowed to do that. And most people know that they can't sleep on other people's property. So the other type of property is public property. And more cities and states are passing legislation that makes it a crime. Tennessee has passed the harshest public camping bill in the nation. It's a felony to sleep on public land. Maybe that's state park land, game land, government office building land. And what I would argue is, if there's only two types of land and they're both off limits, where do I go? There's no other third option for me. And this issue of where do I go got some national attention last year. In the case that came before the Supreme Court was Johnson versus Grants Pass. Back in 2018, there was a case out in Oregon where people were charged with misdemeanor public camping charges. And the defense argued that the community of Grants Pass lacked sufficient shelter options and that it was cruel and inhuman to charge somebody with a crime when there was no remedy for the crime, right? If there's no shelter resources, then how can I be expected to be anywhere, right? So this was upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court, but then it went to the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, for those that are homeless service advocates, the Supreme Court ruled against the Grants Pass. And so municipalities can charge people with public trespassing ordinances, even if there are insufficient shelter resources. So Chattanooga is like a lot of places. There are a couple of shelters, but they're considered high barrier shelters. So what is high barrier? High barrier is anything that gets in the way of people accessing those services. So number one, is the shelter ADA compliant? We serve a lot of people that are disabled and homeless. If you come down 11th Street, you'll see numerous wheelchairs, walkers, people on crutches, people that have significant difficulties getting around. And in Chattanooga, the four shelters that we have, none of them are ADA compliant. The other aspect is sometimes you have to be able to be willing to participate in religious services that the shelter runs. The shelter in hopes that they will have the opportunity to evangelize. But for some people, they are very uncomfortable participating in religious services, or they have a faith that is not in alignment with the shelter service. And so oftentimes these shelters require somebody to have an ID or to be sober. And so these are just a number of the barriers that typically exist in most cities. But there is something that is starting to make a big difference in communities, and it's called a 24/7 low barrier shelter. So let's break that down. What is that? So first of all, let's start with the numbers. 24/7. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Why is that important? Well, most high barrier shelters are the type where you enter around 6 or 7 p.m. and you can stay there overnight, but you can't leave. And then when you do leave in the morning, it's usually 6 a.m. and you have to take all of your belongings with you. That might be fine for some people. In fact, in Chattanooga, some people do use these high barrier shelters. It's better than sleeping outside, especially in the cold winter months, which we are just dipping into. But what if I need a job? What if I have a job and I've got to have a place for my stuff? So if I can't leave my personal belongings behind in a safe and secure location, that's going to be a challenge for me. What if I have a second shift job that requires me to get there at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. or a third shift job? That high barrier once in, once out shelter is not going to meet my employment needs. And so the type of shelter rules tend to sometimes work against the person taking the next step in their lives. We talked about the barriers. We can put up a graph here that compares high barrier and low barrier. So for the low barrier shelter, low sobriety is not required. Usually you'll find resources for people that want to seek sobriety, maintain sobriety, but it's not required. In a high barrier shelter, it usually is. Is an ID required? In a low barrier shelter, it's not. Often in a high barrier shelter, it is. They want to know who is there and who is not. Sometimes people don't have identification or they have difficulty finding identification. Is there program participation? Is it voluntary or involuntary? That'll be a difference in a high barrier or low barrier. In a low barrier shelter, the main focus is on reducing harm and housing first. It's getting that person safe and secure and then being able to move them on to next steps. Usually in a high barrier shelter, the primary goal is abstinence first. And so if you saw episode 3, Understanding Maslow's Hierarchy in Homelessness, then you kind of have a better understanding of why the housing first model has an advantage over trying to put people into treatment first. And so ultimately the goal of the low barrier shelter is immediate safety, basic needs, and linkage to services where the goal for high barrier shelters is long-term stability through structured recovery and rehabilitation. So let's just talk about how many people we're talking about nationwide. So in 2024, we hit the highest number of homeless individuals ever recorded, which was 771,000 homeless individuals on any given night. Here in Hamilton County, it's about 550 to 700. It's based on the PIT count, which is called the point-in-time count, which we all know is inaccurate, but it's our best snapshot of the reality of homelessness. When people are unsheltered, they are exposed to the elements, they're exposed to disease, they have inability to maintain hygiene, sufficient nutrition, and so there's an enormous number of health risks associated with being outside. Now we're getting into the cold winter months, and we just had a cold snap run through here, and it was down to 24 overnight. That is, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to be blunt, that's enough to kill people. And so Chat Foundation, while we are a comprehensive support service for homeless individuals, we don't have the space to run a shelter. But what we do in cold weather months is when the temperature drops below 35 degrees at night for more than 4 hours, that we clear the decks, we clear the furniture out of our community center, and we clear the tables and chairs out of our dining room. And we have staff that stay overnight, and we have people come in, grab a mattress, sleep on the floor, and keep them safe for at least one more day. It makes a big difference. We just opened up for the first time this year, and we had, I think, 43 people on our first night. That's not a lot. But when we get into the deep of winter and we're experiencing temperatures in the 20s or teens, we're going to have about 150 to 160 people in our overnight facilities overnight. So that just underscores, I think, what the need is in Chattanooga. We do not have a 24/7 low barrier shelter. The various administrations have been talking about it for about 15 years. So there's been studies done. They know it's a priority, but there are also elements that keep that from happening. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So I mentioned earlier that some cities have used this approach, and there's been a number of studies done on the efficacy of shelter use. And what studies have shown is the two factors that are necessary in creating an environment that reduces homelessness are a 24/7 low barrier shelter paired with comprehensive homeless support services. At Chat Foundation, we provide over 30 services to those men and women and families experiencing homelessness. So we have that part in place. What we don't have is a structure that keeps people safe and secure and provides that basic level of physical and psychological safety. So who has? There's Miami has a shelter that has gone up that has done remarkably well. Houston, San Antonio, Colorado Springs, but even smaller cities like Lancaster, Pennsylvania, have done a remarkable job by erecting these shelters, providing the services, and then seeing homeless numbers reduce. So last year I was fortunate enough to go out to Colorado and visit a couple different shelters in the area. The Denver Rescue Mission has just a remarkably large and still overwhelmed series of facilities in multiple areas of the city. But I was able to go to Colorado Springs and visit the Springs Rescue Mission, which is really incredible facility. Now they built it from the ground up, so it's a fairly new facility, and it includes residential areas, it includes case management services, it includes a dining hall, it includes it includes some classrooms for adult education. It even includes facilities for animals. And why would you need that? Well, most of the homeless individuals that we meet are unwilling to part with their animals. And if the shelter doesn't allow an animal, they won't go into it. And some people end up, it's a decision that costs them their lives, because if it gets cold enough, unfortunately, people perish. And so this had a little kennel built into it. The residents of the shelter are required to take care of the animal, feed the animal, take the animal out of the shelter and have it go to the bathroom and those things. But they've really thought of everything. And so when I was touring the facility, what was interesting was they have one really large room, and you might want to call it the general population room. When somebody shows up for the first time needing shelter, they go into this room, and it contains about maybe 150 bunk beds, end to end. Really no furniture, just bunk beds and mattresses. There's very little privacy. You can put your stuff under the bunk, but there's no cabinets, there's no lockers. And then off to the side of that facility, behind this wall and these glass panels, there's a nicer section. And that has bunk beds. They're actually made of plywood, and they have some little partial walls, so there's a little bit more privacy. There's chargers for their phone and a little light if they need to read. There's a locker for their things. And so the way this works is it's pretty interesting. Understanding that when people come to the shelter, they're in crisis, they're exhausted, they haven't been well fed, they haven't slept in a while, and the last thing they're thinking about is personal self-improvement. So they go into that first section, and they're quite happy. It's warm, it's dry, and they can sleep and they can rest. And when I was talking to the director of the shelter, he says, usually in about 2 or 3 weeks, once people have gotten into a normal circadian rhythm, they've rested, they're kind of gotten their nutrition back where it needs to be, they start asking the question of the staff, hey, how do I get into that other section, that nice section over there? And the response is, oh, are you ready to start taking some positive steps with case management? Because we can move you over to that section, but it's going to require you to work with a case manager. And here's the thing. They want the shelter to save lives, but they don't want it just to be a building of people without a home. Think of it less as a building and more as a vehicle to exit people from homelessness. And so maybe you have somebody that is homeless, they're unemployed, they have some health issues, and you can't expect them just to spend a couple nights in a shelter and somehow get into housing. But the case manager can sit down with them and make an individual performance plan of what do they need to address to address health issues, to find suitable employment, to find maybe a housing voucher, to find an affordable house. That takes time and it takes energy. And it's not until people are fully rested and secure that they get to move in that direction. And so it's really the approach that they have at Springs and a lot of other shelters is there's incentives. There's a carrot, right? We're trying to say, yeah, we'll help you get to the next step, but we want you to take some steps that are going to allow you to leave the shelter and not have to come back. And it's really an ingenious approach. Shelters that are being effective, that's a component of it. Now, here's something that's important to understand. A 24/7 low barrier shelter is a game changer, but it won't end homelessness. What? What are you saying? Well, for us to really make reductions in homelessness, we need affordable housing, okay? And so think of this as that vehicle, that crucial cog in this machine that starts at the tent or tarp, goes to 24/7 low barrier shelter, goes to efficiency apartment, 2 or 3 bedroom, forever home. It's a key component in getting people to that next step, but it doesn't operate unless there's a concerted effort to build affordable housing in the size and structure and price range that the community needs. And again, we talked about what is affordable housing. It's a moving number. It's based on what you can afford, no more than 30% of your monthly earned income. And so if 2 wage earners are working full-time, making $10 an hour, we're talking about $1,000 a month. Here in Chattanooga, that's going to be very difficult to find. So one other thing I learned in Colorado Springs, and this was really interesting. I asked the director, I said, what was something really surprising you learned when you opened up the shelter? And he said, when we opened up the shelter, we thought it was going to be loud, it was going to be chaotic, there might be fights, that they were prepared for the worst. And they said, the first night we got everybody in there and settled down, and for the first 2 weeks, you could hear a pin drop. And what he was alluding to was, for some people, this was the first time in maybe a year, 6 months, 18 months, where they could safely sleep the night through without having one eye open to guard against assaults. That's the type of thing that this facility is designed to do, to give safety and security. So why doesn't everybody do this? Why doesn't every city do this? Well, costs are involved. There's a question of who's really responsible for this. Is this something that the city, county, or state governments should pay for? Federal funding through HUD does not pay for shelters, and so the federal government is not in the game of erecting shelters, and I'm not sure they should be. Some nonprofits have put together shelters, but here in Chattanooga, we had the opportunity to use a building that existed that wasn't being used, and I won't go into the details, but unfortunately that fell through. And this would have been a building that could have been purchased affordably by the city. The deal fell apart for various reasons, and now the idea is we'll have to build something. And building a facility to house, say, 160 to 200 people, I mean, you're looking at probably costs of $8 to $10 million. And so finances are always a problem. Let's face it. People are not excited about having their taxes used to serve the homeless community. It's unfortunate, and I think it affects the whole community, but it's not a very popular item on ballots. Along with that is the annual operating costs, right? You have to staff this thing. You have to pay for electricity and heat, and so there's annual costs associated with this as well. But a big problem in what you read in the literature is the biggest obstacle for a lot of communities getting a shelter in place is called NIMBYism. NIMBY, NIMBY, stands for not in my backyard. Wherever you put the shelter, it's likely going to be in close proximity to either businesses or residences. And there are some people that do not want this facility in their community. They're afraid that it will just become a magnet or a hub for unhoused people. Chattanooga is a little different. When discussions were going on in our community about putting together a low barrier shelter in the MLK neighborhood where we exist, it seemed like a good fit because Chat Foundation is a block-long facility on 11th Street. The shelter was going to be 2 blocks away, and so right there you have that important pairing of supportive services and the shelter. And initially the neighborhood association got together and they were attending meetings, and I attended those just to find out take the temperature, how do people feel about this? And there was opposition, but it was interesting because it was unlike a lot of NIMBY opposition is based on property values. Hey, if you put this in my community, my house won't sell, my property values will dip. What was interesting about our community, and I'm not really surprised because Chattanooga is a very generous, warm, and caring community, the questions really were focused about, will this center be staffed efficiently and sufficiently to have enough case managers to make it a vehicle to launch people from homelessness? And so there was concern. The concern was, hey, if we erect this shelter, is there a plan in place on how we're going to make it happen? And I think that's a really important thing. It's not just a building that you're erecting with maybe overnight security and a receptionist during the day. No, you have to invest in housing navigators. You have to invest in case managers. You want people to come in and provide adult education, financial literacy classes, but it should be a place where there's robust services that makes people stay in the shelter brief. It's not going to be much of a help to the community if the shelter just becomes a large hub of homelessness that doesn't have any move. And what I would say is in most communities, it seems that there's a stark difference between how we're dealing with homelessness. Are we the type of community that is investing in a shelter and making progressive and strategic investments to reduce homelessness and potentially eliminate homelessness? Or are we just saying, you know what, I want the cops to come through and sweep this away, right? We're going to get rid of the encampments. We're going to arrest people that don't move. Because I would go back to my opening comments. There's only 2 types of property, and if you don't own one of them, you have no place to go. And the criminal justice system is not equipped to end homelessness. In fact, with fines and court costs and jail time, it only prolongs or guarantees homelessness. And so there's really only 2 approaches, and I believe every community in our nation right now needs to say, what are the strategic investments we need to make that are going to get people housed and help them stay safely and securely housed? Okay, that's basically it in a nutshell. If you find this topic interesting, you can Google 24/7 low barrier shelter, and you'll get some really good information, some quality information out there. I do want to mention our organization. Our organization is a staff of about 52 people that work tirelessly 7 days a week, 365 days a year to bring food, clothing, housing support, job placement services, 30 different services to those experiencing homelessness. We are dependent on financial support from the community. I don't like asking for money a lot, but I would ask that in this season of giving, if you could go to our website, www.chatfoundation.org. That's 2 T's in chat, like in Chattanooga, and you'll find a donate page. We would love it if you can make a financial contribution to us. And if you're local, want to come down and check it out, learn more, maybe volunteer, there's a volunteer button also that you can hit. I hear it's good luck if you hit both buttons, but you'll have to find out for yourself. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this episode with somebody who might want to listen to it. Please hit subscribe. But thanks again. Thanks for listening to Give Me Shelter. If you made it this far in the episode, I invite you to share it with at least one person today, because change happens one conversation at a time. I'm Baron King. We'll see you next time.